I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to teach you a strategy that really helps kids remember high frequency words, which are also sometimes called sight words. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you click subscribe and the little bell button to be notified every time I post a new video about teaching literacy in K2. Orthographic mapping is the process of forming connections between letters and sounds to store words in the brain so that readers eventually recognize them instantly by sight. So when kids are learning high frequency words like this one, they're not just memorizing the letters or what it looks like, they're actually mapping it in their brain. However, I know that when I first learned to teach high frequency words or sight words, I was basically told to just have kids memorize. And I know that's been the experience of a lot of teachers as well. So if that was how you were taught to have kids just memorize high frequency words, in the comments right now, leave me the word memorize. So again, our students' brains are building the connections between the letters and sounds in these words, even if the words have tricky or unconventional spellings. Now, the process takes a while at first, right? Like kids don't just look at a word and know it forever, typically, but it speeds up until eventually they're able to recognize them instantly. We can help them build these connections by talking to them about the letters and how they relate to the sounds, and that will help improve their high frequency word knowledge. So, all right, let's do an example with the word she. So there's a lot of different things that I do as part of teaching high frequency words. We're just kind of focusing on one part right now. But this process of orthographic mapping, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw sound boxes similar to Elkonin boxes around the word. So for every sound in the word, those letters are going to be in one box. So you'll notice that I put the S and the H together because even though there's two letters, it's a digraph. So the S and H are working together to make the sound sh. So I would have this word, we already would have read it, we would have talked about what it means, used it in a sentence, maybe even had the kids use it in example sentences, but now we're going to talk about the sounds in the word. So I might just say the word she and then have them tell me the sounds. They could do that by chopping, they could do it by tapping. You want to have them do it left to right if you do tapping. It might be backwards for you. But anyway, they would tell me that the sounds in she are sh, e. So now I want to help them think about those sounds and connect them to the actual letter. So I might say, okay, students, you know, what letters in this word make the sound sh? So they have to tell me S-H. I might ask them, okay, what's the last sound in the word? E. What letter is used to represent the E sound? The letter E, right? So that's just one example for the word she. Depending on the word, your sound boxes would look different. So let's do another example with the word, let's do green. So if we were teaching students this word, we could again do the sound boxes. At the beginning of a word, we have a blend with the G and the R. However, they are two separate sounds. So we're just going to draw two separate boxes. So with the word green, again, I would have the kids say the sounds in green or een, right? So 4 sounds. And then I might say, okay, what letter in this word, letter or letters in this word make the sound E? E. Okay, what's the last sound in the word? N. How is that shown with the N? So we just talk about, again, what are the sounds in the word and connect them to the actual letters, maybe even count the sounds, things like that. Now let's do one that's a little bit, not trickier, but a little bit different. So let's imagine that we're teaching the word like. I often teach this word before kids know about silent E. So if they knew about silent E, I probably wouldn't be teaching this as not a high frequency word, but I wouldn't be teaching it explicitly because they would already know how to decode it, but I usually teach it at the beginning of kindergarten, and so they wouldn't know about silent E yet. So what I would do here is a little bit different because we have the silent E. So I didn't include a sound box around the E because it actually doesn't make a sound, so it's an open box. Sorry, this is crooked. Writing straight is not one of my fortes. Okay, so now we have the word like, right? And we can have them connect the sounds I, k. And then we can talk about the fact that there is a silent E. The E does not make a sound, but it does impact the sound of the I, turning it to the long I sound. And now if this were the beginning of kindergarten, I probably wouldn't use terminology like, you know, this is the long I sound. I mean, I could. It's not bad to introduce those terms. I would want to keep it pretty simple, but I also wouldn't hide the fact that this is a silent E from kids. I would just tell them, hey, this is silent E. You're going to learn about that later. But right now, all you need to know is that it changes the I sound, the sound of the letter I, to be the long I sound I. Okay? So the sounds are I, k, like. So you can do that with little ones, right? At first, they're not doing a lot of the talking or explaining. You're doing a lot of just pointing things out and helping them understand this is the sound, this is the letter. So you take the lead at first, but as time goes on, you may be able to, for example, put up a word. Let's do one last example. And you might actually be able to have the kids draw the sound boxes. Okay, so again, you would have talked about the word, use some examples so they get the meaning of it, and then you might have a volunteer come up and actually draw the boxes. And then a question I like to ask them is, what's interesting about this word, or did anything surprise you about this word? And they might notice that the A and I work together, not to say the long A sound like in train, but actually to say the short E sound, s-ed, said. What's really cool about this, even though it's not like a typical A-I sound, or at least not in many words, is that when you have kids notice, hey, this doesn't make the typical sound, it makes a different sound, when they're reading, if they come across this word, they might try to sound it out, or they might use the long A sound, but then they'll probably remember, hey, oh, this is the AI, and we talked about how it makes the short E sound. So it's actually not a bad thing if kids are sounding out high frequency words, at least not at first. It sounds counterintuitive, but the fact is we can't change the fact that this is how the brain works. The kids' brains are mapping letters to sounds, and that takes time. So if you do have kiddos that are trying to sound out or, you know, blend to read high frequency words, that's okay. Hopefully, the more you work on helping them link the sounds to the letters, the more easily they'll be able to correct themselves. And of course, with time, more exposure and more practice, they will eventually learn to read those words instantly by sight. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you want to dive more in depth with me on my process for teaching high frequency words as well as phonics, look for the link below to sign up for my free 1-hour online workshop about teaching phonics and high frequency words in K2. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this was helpful. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.